Okay, hello everyone. How are you guys enjoying Chicago, my home city? Woo. So excited to have you all here. Like Dan said, we put together a handy visitor's guide with some curated stuff in there. I contributed. Certainly, if you have any questions about things to do, places to eat, like hit me up on Twitter. That Twitter. You probably don't want to follow me, though. It's honestly just like a lot of shit posting and like politics. You should follow Titan, though. Like, it's a lot of really great developer content. We have a really active blog, a lot of Laravel, Just, Views. So yeah, definitely give them a follow here. So I am here today to talk to you about Vue, and specifically front-end testing in Vue. And I feel like anyone who actually does follow me on Twitter for some reason is like, wait, isn't she a React dev? Like, to the point where she literally has dev battles with members of her team who use Vue and just like shit talks constantly? Yes, all of that is very true. So, but like, can I hear it from the Vue devs in the audience? And now can I hear it from the React devs in the audience? Okay, I actually love that enthusiasm, thank you. But they were being really loud, like there's probably 6 of them out there. So yeah, I knew if I gave a talk about testing in React, like you guys would immediately tune me out, even though there's no Wi-Fi in here. Like, I feel like you'd start playing solitaire or something on your phones, or like, I don't know, whatever. So yeah, I'm gonna give a talk in Vue today, and not only am I giving a talk in Vue today, I'm live coding, because I'm kind of a masochist and I haven't made a public spectacle of myself in a while. So I'm gonna kind of like count on some of you people in the front row, like when I inevitably screw up, and I will screw something up, despite my little like cheat sheet here. Just like be like, hey, I know you're like floundering, but you forgot a colon, and I'll probably give you some like Titan swag or something after. Just, you know, come find me. And that's our Team React and Team Vue. So like I said, yeah, that's the Titan squad. I know they're back there somewhere. So I mentioned that we have these like battles. We have our second one coming up. It says August. We were talking about do it next Friday, but like, I don't know, I feel like we're all gonna be really tired and burned out from, you know, Laracon. So our first one, we basically just built like a Twitter clone in Vue and React in like an hour, and I don't know, I screwed up pretty bad because live coding is really hard. Like I said, masochist. But our second one's kind of cool. So we're using React Native and NativeScript, even though we've never done it before. So we're basically building iOS and Android apps just with our knowledge of React and Vue. We had our first one in June, and then everyone went on vacation or whatever. So round 2 is going to be coming up. Keep an eye on Twitter. It's going to be pretty fun. So what are we talking about today? We're going to talk about 2 different libraries. The first is called Jest, and the second, which most of you are probably at least somewhat more familiar with, is this library Vue Test Utils. So what is Jest? I'm going to try to like break down the difference between the 2 of them a little bit here. So Jest is what you're actually calling from your command line. It's your test runner. A lot of you are probably familiar with Mocha. That seems to be the most popular alternative in that Vue Test Utils universe. And Jest lets you actually assert things. So it's kind of the same thing like in PHP unit, where you say like, hey, I have 2 + 2 and I expect it to be 4. Like pretty straightforward if you've done any backend testing. It's kind of the same thing. The other thing that Jest what Jest lets you do is mock things. Try to say Jest mock like 10 times fast. So kind of like in PHP unit, if you're familiar, you're basically saying something like, I don't really want to call this API because you don't want to update your database every single time your front-end test suite fires. So like, Jest basically lets you pretend like you called your API. And the other thing that Jest does that's really cool is this thing called snapshots. And we're going to look at that in a little bit once we get into the code. I'm not going to go into it much now, but it's kind of part of the reason that I like Jest better than Mocha. It's really, really sweet. And the other thing that's awesome about Jest is that you can use it for both Vue and React. It was actually developed by Facebook for React, but there's all sorts of stuff you can do with it with Vue. It's pretty straightforward to set up if you use this package I'm about to talk about. Spoiler alert. So Vue Test Utils, what does that do? It lets you test your Vue-specific code. I know, you guys are all super shocked, right? Any React devs out there, Enzyme is pretty much the equivalent. So what Vue Test Utils does is let you mount your component. And it doesn't quite work like something like Dusk, where it's in an actual browser. But it basically just takes a component and lets you test it, or it and its children, in isolation. And it lets you do stuff to that component. So you can say, like, I want to pass in these props, and then click this button. Pretty much anything that you can do to a component, Vue test utils has some sort of like method to let you do that. And then basically what you're generally going to be testing is what's being spit out in the HTML. So you're saying something like, oh, hey, you know, I clicked this button, and now I expect this thing to show up. So normally, if you want to set all this up, there's like all these steps you have to do, and you have to do all this stuff in your package.json and blah, blah, blah. It's kind of hard, and I feel like probably a lot of the reason that some of you have maybe dipped your toe into it but never really got that far is because you got stuck on one of these steps. So we're kind of working on this package to make it easier. Right now, it's not actually on Packagist. We should have that out sometime this week. But later this week, you can basically just run this command, and then it like overwrites all your artisan presets. So you can just run the front-end preset Vue, and it'll install Vue and Just and all of the dependencies, and you basically can just test right out of the box. It should be pretty easy. So yeah, definitely keep an eye out on Twitter for that. We will let you know when it's ready. If you do want to configure it yourself or just like are interested in it from my talk or whatever, Caleb Porzio, who works at Titan with me and is speaking tomorrow at Laracon, he wrote a really, really great blog post. So definitely check it out if you want to see how all this works under the hood or you know, just kind of are more interested in the subject. And there will be a link at the end, obviously. So what are we building today? So my first thought was, okay, so Laracon was in New York last year. It's in Chicago this year, and Chicago pizza is bae, and New York pizza is super overrated. So we need some sort of like pizza versus pizza widget. Yeah, I'm already getting booed. This talk's going great. But then I was like, oh man, like, I mean, it's not a Samantha Geitz talk if I'm not like pissing off a bunch of people, but I don't know. People might be watching this on the internet, and they've never had Chicago pizza. I know there are some vegans in the crowd. Shout out to my brother somewhere out there. So I was like, I need to like think bigger. So what we're really building today is a widget that's GIF or GIF. And if you're thinking that I'm basically doing this just to say GIF for the next 45 minutes and piss all of you off, yep. Also my boss, who is very much on Team GIF. And if you've never given an entire conference talk just to anger your boss, aka Matt Stauffer, oh my God, he's so nice, but I can make him so mad. It's so fun. All right, you guys ready to see me try some code? Yeah? All right. Switch over here. Can everyone kind of see this okay-ish? Bigger? All right, I'll try to go a little bigger. I went on here before my talk to like try it, so. Oh my God, we're going 28, so big. All right. Is that any better? Obviously, all this is going to be on GitHub, too. If you're having trouble seeing it, I'll try to like shout out what I'm doing. I was hoping there might be a couple extra monitors or something, but we'll see how this goes. OK, so I'm going to switch over to my browser here and show you guys the app again. So basically, there are two radio buttons. How do you pronounce GIF? GIF or GIF, because like there's only one right answer. Why do you think it should be pronounced that way? What is your name? And then I have the very obvious reason, I can't really scroll in here, it's the way the creator of the format wanted GIF, submitted by Samantha. So right now, I'm going to show you some of my Vue code here. And this is using Tailwind, which if you haven't used it, it's amazing. It's a CSS framework by Steve Schroeder and Adam Wathen. Check it out, it's awesome. But basically, this is just a template with nothing but markup right now. There's no actual Vue functionality. One thing I do want to call out, because we'll be using them, these all have IDs. So yes, it is JIF and GIF. Reason, name, a little button with submit here, and then some hard-coded user responses, and then this like blank export default, because there's nothing really going on. So, everything else is really, really basic. This is not how I usually write Laravel apps. This is not how Titan usually writes Laravel apps. Don't judge us. But basically have like a route that just returns a home view. Just like a really basic little component here. We have a vote model that is just like empty. I'll show you SQL Pro here. Picked reason name, like super basic Laravel app. Even people who really haven't used Laravel much can probably figure out like most of what's going on here. So, With Jest, you have a couple of different options for creating test files. And the first one is to create a spec.js, like in the same, actually I'll show you my, sorry, I have gif.gif.view and then gif.gif.spec.js. You can also do .test.js, or you can create a directory called __tests, tests __, and just run it from there. If you wanted to configure it more than that for some reason, you can go into your package.json file. There's all this just config stuff. This is kind of what that package is going to do for you, so you don't have to screw around with all this because it's really annoying and you have to like Stack Overflow it every single time. So yeah, but you can get more, custom if you want to. I don't know why you'd want to. All right, so when you're writing just tests, so like in PHP, you need to have like class, vote test or whatever, right? So in Jest, you're going to say describe gif, enclosure here. And that's kind of the same thing because JavaScript doesn't really have like classes in the same sort of way. And the first thing we're going to do is do it, which is kind of like how you do, test underscore, it has votes or whatever in PHP unit. And we're going to say it renders. Start off super, super basic here. Same thing, just pass through closure. So view test utils, like I said, lets you mount things. And it calls it a wrapper, like that mounted component. So we're going to just say let wrapper equals mount gif, and then we're going, nope. So you know how typing with someone watching over your shoulder is hard? I've got like 800 of you watching over my shoulder, so. All right, so obviously mount is not defined. So we're going to import it from view test utils. Now it's saying that gif is not defined, so we're going to import that component. Okay, and now it's passing even though we're not actually like doing anything yet. So what we're going to do is tell this test that we expect this wrapper to have text to contain. And we're going to have this fail first, just to kind of see how that works. So we're going to say sup laracon, which is not in that component anywhere. Save it. And it's failing because this string of the component doesn't actually have this value, which is exactly what we expected. But if we go in and we say, how do you pronounce the word GIF? Pop that bad boy in here. And now it's passing because that string is in there. So I had mentioned how cool snapshots are. And if you want to be super lazy and you kind of feel like you want to be diligent and do some front-end testing, but you don't like really want to do it because you're not a good developer or whatever, this is so cool. I'm actually really excited about this. Okay, so you can say expect wrapper to match snapshot. This is a Jest thing. And save it. It says one snapshot written. So a snapshot basically is just something that is rendered to a string and saved to a file, which, for whatever reason, like when I was practicing this, takes a really long time to load in here. I don't know why, but I know it's going to just take a second. So let's try this again. It literally took 30 seconds like last time, and I was like, why is this so frickin' slow? And it was not at home. It's not when I usually do this, so all right. Why are you not going? I literally know I'm not doing anything wrong because it says one snapshot written. There it is. See, I told you. I didn't screw up. Okay. And it's usually not this slow. I think my computer's just sad because it doesn't have internet. It's like Monday or Tuesday or whatever day it is. Wednesday. God. Okay. So, guys, it's been a long week. Okay, so what a snapshot is it takes your component and it renders it to a string. So you've got everything in here, and you can kind of like imagine if you're passing through all sorts of props and stuff, or like checking that stuff happens and you just want to like compare it. It's really, really easy. That one method just does it. So if we go into our component here, and let's say like someone, Matt Stauffer, was salty about the GIF thing and was like, no, it's not GIF, it's GIF. So what our test then does is compares the old component rendered to a string to the new one and is like, hey, this changed, yo. Like, did you mean to do that? Which, no, we didn't. But just for funsies right now, we'll update the snapshot. So you can say it says run yarn test U to update them. You can just hit your U key. And it's like, no, we actually did mean to update that. We know. If we go back into our snapshot here, it says GIF, right? So basically, it's just a really, really easy way to see if your component is changing in ways that you don't expect. And we're going to change it back because, reasons. OK, so that's kind of like the super, super basics of how you test. But obviously, that's not really robust. So the next thing we're going to do is check that it updates the selected pronunciation. Also, pronunciation is a really weird word to spell, and I'm going to do it wrong over and over, and I'm just not even going to try to fix it, because it doesn't matter. OK, so what we're going to do is basically check that radio button will update our view component. So we're going to, actually this time, so we did a mount before up here, right? So the other thing you can do in view test utilities is a shallow mount. They're the exact same thing, except a shallow mount only is that component, and a mount is that component and all of its child components. So at some point we're going to refactor it, but we're just going to right now say let wrapper equals shallow mount, GIF, and it's going to fail because it doesn't know what shallow mount is. So we need to import that up here. Save it. OK. So going back into our component here, we'll look at our radio buttons. And they have IDs of GIF and GIF, right? So we're going to say wrapper.find that ID of GIF and trigger a click. So we're just telling it, hey, we got this mounted component, find this radio button, click it. And then we expect wrapper.vm.pict, which is how you can access data on it, that .vm, to be GIF, which is the value of that radio button. And obviously, this is going to fail because it's like, what is vm.pict? So we're going to go into our view component here, scroll down. We're going to add data, return, pict, just an empty string for right now. So if we did this right, so instead of undefined, it's comparing it now to an empty string. It's like, no, we have this, but it's an empty string. We're not updating it. So we're going to scroll back up here to our radio buttons. And we're going to say, make sure I'm doing this in the right place. vModel is pict. And then vModel equals pict. Save it. And now we're passing. So click the button. It updates this. And if we grab this again, and for some reason you wanted to say GIF, cool. So now we know that's working. So we're going to get a little bit more in depth here. We're going to test that that entire form is submitting. So we're going to say it submits a vote. And when I say submit, I don't mean at this point to the API. We're going to go into that a little later. It's a little bit more complicated, so we're just going to start pretty basic here. So what are the things we need to do? Let's go through this and write some comments here. So we need to trigger the radio button of pronunciation. Oh my God, I'm just so off on that today. OK. I have an English degree, too. You think I'd be better at spelling? I'm not. We want to update the reason input. We want to update the name input. Click the submit button. And then we're going to want to add this new vote to some sort of votes array, right? So that the component can keep track of all of our votes. So we're going to check that the vote is added to votes. And we're going to check that the vote is rendered somewhere. Oh my God, this is really going to bother me. OK, so we're just going to grab this again because we're lazy. There are obviously ways to dry this up, but we're not going to do it right now because that's just more places for me to potentially screw up. OK, so kind of like in PHP unit where you can arrange something first, we're going to kind of arrange this vote that we're going to expect to see. So we're not doing string comparison over and over. We'll say let vote pict is GIF. Reason is It is how you pronounce gin, and name is Samantha. And then we will check that this is vote.picked. Oh, yep, thanks guys. Okay, so what we're gonna do is refactor this and pull this out into what's called a before each method. So we don't have to declare wrapper and over because obviously I can't remember to do it very well. So we're gonna just grab this from here. We're gonna declare the wrapper variable at the top, let wrapper, and then we're gonna say wrapper equals shell amount, get rid of this mount, get rid of this mount, and we're passing? We are passing, cool. Okay, so we want to update that reason input. And we're going to actually save that input node to a variable just because we got to do a couple things to it. We're going to say let reason equals wrapper.find reason. We're going to say reason.element.value equals vote.reason. So I think it would make more sense than having picked to have some sort of new vote object that we're doing stuff to. So we're going to do that really quick update here. We're going to say instead of vm.picked, do a multi-select, and call that vm.newVote.picked. Wrapper is not defined. Oh, okay. So picked of undefined, that's what we're expecting. So we're going to say return new vote picked, and then we're going to update the vModel to be new vote.picked. Awesome. And we'll add reason and name while we're here. Still passing, but let's make this fail. So we're going to say we expect wrapper.vm.newVote.reason to be that vote.reason from our vote variable up here. And that's going to fail for the reason we expect. We're not setting a vModel. So we're going to go into our view component, and we're going to say vModel is newVote.reason. And it's still failing. And the reason that it's failing here is you need to do one more thing, is you need to say, hey, so we changed the value, but we need to actually call that onChange event. So we're going to do reason.trigger, not click this time, we're going to do input. And that's how view knows that we're done updating that input. And now we're passing. So we're going to grab this and do the same thing for name. Multi-select everything so I don't have to type. And we're failing because it's an empty string. So again, we're going to go and add a vModel of new vote. Or no, that's name, not picked. Okay, we're passing, but we still have a couple more steps here. So we need to click the submit button, which is pretty easy. We're just going to say wrapper.find submit. Trigger click. We don't need to actually set this to anything because we're not manipulating it. We're not setting a value. We're just click the button. So we want to check that the vote is added to votes. So the first thing we kind of want to do is verify that there are 0 votes until we add a vote. So we're going to kind of go back up to the top here, and we're going to say expect wrapper.vm.votes.length, because again, that's going to have to be some sort of array, to be 0. And that's going to fail because it's WTF is a votes. Length of undefined, right? So go back into our component. We're going to say votes is an empty array. And now we're passing, so we want to actually check now this is going to be 1 after we trick the button. So we're going to say length to be 1. And obviously that's not working because we're not doing anything when we submit the button. So we're going to go back into our view component. We're going to say methods add this.votes.push, this.newVote. It's still going to fail because we have to actually go up and do an @click, add. And now we're passing. Pretty sweet. So we're not actually rendering these votes anywhere yet, so we're going to basically just say we expect wrapper.text to contain vote.reason, and we expect wrapper.text to contain vote.name. And it doesn't contain that because we're not doing it. So we're going to go in, and where we're hard coding it down here, we're going to do a v4, vote and votes. And we're going to get rid of this and do vote.reason. Don't need an extra exclamation point here. And we're going to change this to vote.name. So now our snapshot is failing. Because remember how I said if you're doing something to your component and it's changing in a way you don't expect? Because if you scroll up here, it's like, oh wait, hey, we had all this hard-coded stuff in and now it's gone. But that's cool, we expect that, we got rid of it. So we're like, okay, sweet. Hit the U key, update our snapshot. And view template compilation is failing, probably because I added a U here, so let's get rid of that. Actually update our snapshot. Okay, cool. So go back into our snapshot here, and we'll make sure that's gone. And it is, because at this point, we're not actually passing in any votes when we mount the component. So that's exactly what we expect. So let's test this in the browser and see how we're looking here, make sure everything's kind of looking good. Let's do a refresh. I am running in my terminal in the background like a yarn watch. So we're going to say giraffe as our reason. And submit it. But notice how it doesn't clear out the inputs. We don't really want that either. I think that's kind of bad UX. When you submit a form, it should just reset it. So we're going to test for that too. So go back into our spec file. And we're going to say we expect wrapper.vm.newVote.reason not, so it's the opposite, to be vote.reason. Same thing with name. And obviously that's failing. So we're going to be kind of lazy and not very dry here. Just grab this little object here and set this .newVote to that. Obviously, it'd be better to do some sort of reset method or something, but whatever. Cool. Okay, so we're passing. And go back in here. Let's make sure that's kind of what we expect. Sweet. But one thing that you can do is hit the submit button and submit empty stuff, which is bad. We don't want to do that. So we're going to test and make sure that we can't do that unless all of these are filled out. So going back into our spec file, we will say it cannot submit without all fields. So this one actually is pretty easy to test. We're going to just trigger that button. And we're going to say that we expect this to be 0, right? Submit it, and then we shouldn't have any votes added. And that's going to fail because it expects 0 but receives 1 because it's still adding that. So we're going to go back into our component, and we're going to add a computed property of valid. And we're just going to say return this.newVote.picked and this.newVote.reason and this.newVote.name. So it's expecting all of 3 of these to exist, and as long as they do, it is valid, and if not, it's not valid. So obviously this is still failing because we're not actually doing anything with this yet. So we're going to go back up to our button here, and we're going to add a disabled property here. Disabled, and we're going to say if it's not valid, it's disabled. So our snapshot's failing again, and imagine you guys can probably figure out why, which is a good thing, because hey, this is disabled when you mount the component because nothing is filled out. Go back in here and make sure we can't submit. We can't. But it kind of looks like we can, so that's not great. So we're also going to add class, and we're going to say opacity 50 and cursor not allowed. These are Tailwind things if you didn't figure that out already, if it's not valid. Snapshot's still failing because now It has these extra classes and disabled, but that is what we expect. Cool, so we'll update our snapshot. And everything's passing again. Okay, so at this point, I think we're probably ready to start pulling in like some actual data here and actually test that everything's being loaded properly from props. So we're gonna go back into our web PHP file, and we're gonna uncomment this. We're passing in all of our votes, rendering it to JSON. And we'll go into our home.blade.php and add, we'll call it data votes. Votes. Okay. So we're going to say, we'll go back up here to where it renders. I think that kind of is a place where it makes sense. We're going to say it renders with props. So we'll go back and grab this like vote variable that we set up before just to have some stuff to test against. Again, you could probably dry this up and just move it outside of your methods, but that's okay. So we're going to say that we expect wrapper.text to contain vote.reason, and we expect it to contain vote.name. We expect both these things to happen as soon as the component's mounted, and obviously it's not because we're not doing anything with them. So we'll go back into our component here, and we'll set up props, call it data votes, which again, showing you in our home component here, or our home blade file. Data votes, pretty straightforward if you're at all familiar with Vue, React devs. Sorry, I know we do things in a different way. All right, so we got these data votes, and then we'll set this down here to this dot data votes. Now like a whole bunch of stuff is going to start failing, and the reason for that is because we're saying that we expect votes to kind of just be this empty array, and now we're like passing in this data votes out of nowhere. So we're going to have to update this in two different places. First, we're going to do it here before we actually test this and try to get this one to pass. So the way that you can pass props into a mounted Vue component, you say props data, which is an object, data votes. That's just an empty array. So most of these tests are passing again, because like, okay, cool, yeah, we got this empty votes array, everything's good, but obviously, renders with props is still failing here because we're not actually passing in those props that we're expecting. So we're not going to try to pass them into all of the tests, we really just care about this one, so we're just going to kind of like overwrite this wrapper, but instead of data votes being an empty array, we're going to pass in vote. That needs to be part of an array, actually. And now we're passing. So basically this says, okay, cool, so we're mounting this GIF component, we're passing in these props, we expect to see them right away. If we really want to be super fancy about it, we can do my snapshots, expect wrapper to match snapshot. Save it. Then go into our snap file. So we've got our first one where it just kind of renders, and then renders with props. And oh hey, it's our votes down there. Pretty sweet. All right, so there's one more thing I have to show you guys, and it's kind of complicated, and I feel like it's one of those things where you might not like 100% follow right now, but if you're actually writing like just tests at some point, you'll go back and you'll look at my GitHub repo and you'll go like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So what we want to test right now is that we can post to our API. And so basically we're like testing all this asynchronous stuff, but we don't want to actually call this API. So there's a couple things we have to do. So I'm going to go back to our API routes file, take another look here. So just to post to /votes, because it's in the API routes file, it's /API/votes. Just kind of creating, we're just returning like a 200 empty JSON response. Really, really straightforward. So what we're going to expect here, and if any of you aren't super familiar with Laravel, like, which would be weird because you're at Laracon, there's this bootstrap.js file where Axios is put on the window. So within your actual like JavaScript components, you don't have to, like you can just call Axios, right? You don't have to import it or anything. So it's going to be a little important in a second here. But we're going to say, we'll go back and we'll just add it to the submit to vote. Like we might want to test this separately if we were being like, you know, really great, but we're at a conference, it's fine, we're on vacation. So we're going to say when we submit right? We trigger this like submit button. We're going to say we expect axios.post to be called with /API/votes, and then the vote object we have up here. So this is failing because Axios is not defined. But wait, didn't we just say that it's on the window? So what you have to do is basically tell your tests, like, okay, so when we say Axios, we mean kind of this like mocked version of it, but also on the window. So if you're doing an import, you kind of do the same thing, but you don't necessarily do this on window. So we're going to say window.axios equals. We're going to specifically override this post method here. If you're doing multiple methods, you have to do this in a different way. But you might do like get, post, patch, whatever. So we're calling just.fn.mock implementation. So basically saying, okay, cool, so whenever windows.axios.post is called, we want to specifically just call this like just mock that doesn't do anything. And we say basically like what this mock does is just resolves a promise. So if you were actually wanting to return some data, you'd pass it through here. But we're saying, okay, just like pretend we're calling this thing, just resolve a promise. If you're not familiar with promises in JavaScript, so when you're calling an API, you don't have something happen right away, right? You're saying like, hey, API, do this thing. And the API is like, okay, cool, let me get back to you. Okay, it did the thing, here's what happened. It passed or it failed or whatever else. So basically that's what a promise is. It says like, I'm going to wait for this thing to happen, and then once it happens, I'm going to do something else. And how that actually looks is, so we'll go to our add method here, which is what happens when we click that submit button. We'll say, kind of like we did before, axios.post/API/votes. Set new vote, passing that through. .then, so when that promise resolves, we actually want to do all this other stuff. Like, we don't want to be pushing this or like resetting the vote or whatever until we know it was like sent up to the API. And if we had some sort of validation or something, we might have a catch method or be looking for some like an error or something. But we don't actually want to do this stuff until we know the API was like, yep, sweet, we got a new vote. It's in the database. But scroll down here. Notice how it says expected 1. But received 0. Expects this votes.length to be 1. And this worked before. So it's not working, even though I'm sure if we go into our actual thing here, and we'll say, we'll do one as a team GIF right now, just to be equitable. So we'll say, you don't say graphical interchange format, LOL, Matt Stauffer. And hey, so it's in there. So we know it's working, but like, why isn't our test working? And the reason for that, and this is where a lot of people I think get kind of like hung up on front-end testing, is because Vue kind of batches the updates. If you're familiar with this like next tick method, it basically like waits until it's like, okay, cool, we're like good to do all of these DOM updates and we're gonna do them. So what we need to do is go into this and be like, hey, this is asynchronous. Like, there's going to be some sort of promise going down in here. Oh, man, so we need to, like, wait for this promise resolve to do a thing. You don't have to do this in React, by the way. OK, so we said async. And then now we can say await wrapper.vm.next tick. So basically saying, like, cool, so once this promise resolves, call this next tick and, like, update all the stuff that you're just like holding on to, waiting for this promise to resolve. And now everything's passing again. So basically, that's how you test API stuff. And you just say, I expect this to be called with this data. And then I expect these things to happen. Like I said, I know a lot of you are probably like, wait, what? Just go to the repo and like look at how I did it. Or go to the Just docs. I actually have a lot of really cool mocking stuff that I'm not going to get into today because I just don't want to break your brains. But you can set up like auto mock. If you have like an __ mocks directory, you can just like use those auto-magically. It's really, really freaking cool. I do want to write a blog post about it at some point. So like I said, like follow Titan's Twitter and you'll just at some point see like, hey, advanced asynchronous testing in JavaScript. And yeah. That's pretty much all I have for y'all today. I did not screw up too bad, so yay. So yeah, if you have any questions, just come find me or hit me up on Twitter. I might not know them because I'm like not great at Vue, but I can probably hook you up with someone who does. Yeah, so thanks for listening, and I hope you guys learned a thing.